A great pleasure to have with us our colleagues from Ireland, Professor Moynagh Sullivan and Professor María Amor Barros del Rio, and Caroline Eufrausino, who we are all proud of you, Caroline, for launching your book on Enright here. So I will... Yes. Sim.
Desculpa, Laura, eu queria dizer uma coisa, né? Bom, eu vou ter que deixar o evento por outras obrigações, né? Eu queria parabenizar a Munira, a Mariana, o Alan, não apenas pelo lançamento, também pelas lembranças aqui trazidas. E, bom, agradeço mais uma vez a coordenação do evento pela honra de integrar a mesa. E sintam-se em casa na nossa faculdade, no nosso departamento, mesmo de modo remoto, e continuem contando com apoio em tudo que for necessário ao longo do evento, tá? Qualquer coisa, entrar em contato comigo, tá? Bom, então, bom evento para vocês, gente.
Muito obrigada, Mariana. Muito obrigada pela presença. Okay. So now we will continue with Moynagh and Amor. Amor is already, okay, both of you are all with your cameras on. Thank you. So I would say that it is really a great pleasure to receive here online, that's say on the screen, Professor Moynagh Sullivan, who is Associate Professor at Maynooth University, the National University of Ireland. She is a researcher in motherhood, gender and psychoanalysis, and has examined intersections of these areas in the fields of Irish writing, as well as contemporary poetry, fiction, art, and popular culture more broadly. Moynagh has been also the supervisor of Caroline's MA dissertation or thesis, depending on where we are in the Atlantic world. And we are very happy to have her with us. Also, it is really a great pleasure to have with us Professor María Amor Barros del Rio. She is lecturer in English at University of Burgos, Spain. Her research focuses mainly on gender studies and contemporary fiction in English, with a special interest in Irish fiction. Other fields of interest are critical pedagogy and second language teaching. And again, I am really very happy to have her with us because Rosario, another former students of our program, is now doing her PhD with Amor. So you see that this network with our colleagues in Ireland and in Spain and in other places in the world with Centers of Irish Studies, are really working. Thanks a lot, and I am very proud to have here also Caroline. So I will pass the floor to Moynagh first, then Amor, and then Caroline will have some words to say. Moynagh, please, the micro.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know, my network kept going down there, so my apologies. I hope I get to stay for this. Caroline, it's so lovely to see you. Laura, thank you so much for the invitation, and lovely to see Mariana as well. So it gives me the greatest pleasure to be here today at the launch of this book. And it is a great honour for me to be able to say a few words about Caroline's achievement. Some years ago, I supervised Caroline's brilliant MA thesis at Maynooth University, and that piece of work made it very clear that her perceptiveness, her sensitivity, and her keen intelligence would make her ongoing work an important addition to the international field of Irish studies. So I am so very delighted that Caroline continued her academic career and grateful that she has added her voice to the community of international scholars working today with this wonderful book that we are here to celebrate. The long-standing relationship between Brazilian Irish studies scholars and Maynooth is continued by the focus in her book on motherhood. At Maynooth at the moment, we have a research collective on motherhood studies, and Caroline's focus here continues to forge important connections between us and Brazil. The The importance of Anne Enright's work grows year on year, not only in Ireland, but globally, as this excellent close focus study by Caroline shows. Her interpretive readiness to see what is hidden in plain sight and, to use her words, and to look outside established frames and to consider material and perspectives that have been excluded or have been seen as extraneous to the patriarchal national literary story, which is so, which has many wonderful writers, one of whom we just heard about, and we listened to really fascinating conversations about Paul Durcan and how he fits into a national tradition of writing, which, had Joyce and Kavanagh, and a sort of a pattern of influence between generations of men. And what Caroline's work does is to really think about how women's writing can be added to that tradition. And her focus on Enright is really powerful in doing that. Through the image of the Triscala, or the triple spiral, which Caroline carries through her analysis as an allegorical frame, she provides sustained unpacking of motherhood, pregnancy, and subjectivity, produced through the dyadic framing of mother and child. Caroline adds powerfully to a growing body of scholarship that Enright's work attracts. Following on the indispensable Visions and Revisions by Claire Bracken, edited by Claire Bracken and Susan Cockle, and Bracken's excellent framing of Enright in Irish Feminist Futures, Caroline joins the company of the inspired feminist scholarship that has not only shaped Enright studies, but is also really crucially reshaping Irish studies. And this wonderfully rich book adds abundantly to the extant scholarship. Caroline centralizes the maternal in her interpretation, and through this she's able to explore how Enright's work fits into or sits at odds with prevailing literary and critical traditions. And she also examines how Enright's readings exceeds the terms of a traditional literary national landscape, largely shaped by lines of inheritance from literary fathers to sons, by placing it squarely into an international and transnational context. Enright's work demands a prismatic set of lenses to illuminate the refractions of her different styles, concerns, and registers, and Caroline provides this illumination from her introduction, which sets the historical and theoretical tone, through to her very fine reading of the later work. Her attentive exploration sets Enright's work in the light of traditions, and in doing so, lights a lamp for the future, bringing the mother into focus, challenges literary criticism to rethink its focus or its emphasis on fathers and sons, and poses questions for the 21st century. For if the 20th century was, as Declan Kyberd argues in Inventing Ireland, concerned with the foundational crisis, the new state, the Irish new state, was concerned with the foundational crisis expressed in the cultural sphere in anxieties about father-son relationships, then perhaps the 21st century belongs, not exclusively, but in partnership also to mothers, and somewhere as well along the way to daughters. So Caroline builds on the work that shows how Enright engages with this literary tradition structured around the father and the absence of the mother in a way that both preserves and refigures it. Geraldine Meany noted that when Enright claims Joyce as a type of literary foremother rather than forefather, she queers the very foundational pitch on which the modern Irish canon is built. In keeping with this queering of the pitch, this book observes how Enright relates to this history by situating Enright's work in a much more diverse setting, taking, as I said earlier, transnational, women's, postmodern, postnationalist, and world literatures into account. It shows how the interplay of motherhood and writing began early in Enright's career with the publication of Making Babies. And then it looks at how the later work examines questions of reproduction and social reproduction, and traces how Enright's earlier short stories explicitly examine how women's private rights to bodily sovereignty were compromised by becoming the site of public ideological battle in the new Irish state. Her brilliant analysis of taking pictures shows how Enright brings mothers into the picture from which they have been taken out. It also shows how this trajectory develops in Enright's work, providing a really important developmental narrative of the evolution of Enright's oeuvre. The doublings of the past, its pregnant in its pregnancy and its potential to be rewritten is highlighted in Caroline's analysis of Enright's portrayal of a controversial pregnant historical figure in The Pleasure of Eliza Lynch, which also calls up other history and encodes practices of metafictional historiography. The third part of Caroline's book shows how Enright's work continues to explore history, embodiment, and the evocation of otherness, to show how forgiveness and healing becomes possible through the restoration of the figural mother to discourse in first-person narratives. This study charts how Enright depicts how trauma is enacted on and stored by the body, and how the body also functions as a mode of social integration and as a reintegrative mode of bringing forth structuring absences. Finally, Caroline brings this analysis right up to date by focusing in her conclusion on how Actress, Enright's most recent novel, brings mother-daughter relationships ever more into focus as a structuring force in thinking about more inclusive and productive coalitions across oceans and across generations. This book is a serious and important addition to the field, pointing out new interpretive directions for readers already familiar with Enright's commanding prose, as well as providing a guide for readers new to her work. Many congratulations, Caroline, and thank you for this thoughtful, perceptive, and important study.
Oh, thank you very much for your words, Moynagh. I'm really grateful for being here. So first of all, because here at USP and FEFELESH, as Professor Miralda said in the beginning of this session, we say here FEFELESH, and FEFELESH is my faculty here at São Paulo, where I find love and where I feel at home. Yes, so it's a pleasure for me to be here. And Chair of Irish Studies, W.B. Yeats, was really important for the development of my research on Irish literature for multiple reasons. But I'd like to mention a few. So I was awarded a grant to take part in IASIL in 2013. The grant was waived by the Embassy of Ireland, along with the Chair of Irish Studies. And that was really important to take part in that conference, which was held in Queen's University in Belfast. And because I was able to be in contact with academics around the world, and was key to the development of this book. So Moynagh was one of the lecturers there. So this conference was really important for this book. And I'm very thankful for the great scholars and professors I had the opportunity to take courses and lectures here at USP, thanks to the Chair of the Irish Studies and with Professor Laura and Professor Moynagh. So I would mention some of them. So Professor Claire Connolly from University College Cork, Professor Tina O'Toole from University of Limerick, Professor Anne Fogarty from UCD, Professor Ruth Barton from Trinity College Dublin, and it's a very long list. But I'd like to mention these very powerful women scholars who encouraged me to keep on this research. And Moynagh, it's an honor to have you here, because in 2010, so 11 years ago, I was in Maynooth University. I'm very thankful for the university as well, because I was awarded a scholarship to be there. So, and that's where this book started. In 2010, I decided that I wanted to study Enright's works, and I wanted to focus on motherhood. So 11 years ago there in Maynooth, I started to study this. And I decided to study Enright because I believe that she offers an experience to the reader. So she doesn't describe women as sing, she describes women as we feel it. And while reading Anne Enright, I used to, for a long time in my research, I used to say that she provokes an inside-out perspective. So I'd say that she guides the reader to get inside the fictional world and the fictional characters and to get to know about this secret realm of motherhood and what happens to women when they become mothers or during pregnancy. Because I don't know how and I don't know why. Yes, we know, but women keep this as a secret. All the anxieties, all the sufferings regarding motherhood, it's all a secret. We don't talk about it. We don't discuss it. We don't share. We don't debate. And I consider that Anne Enright, in her writings, she has this quite witty way to cast light over these shadows and to expose these feelings regarding motherhood while narrating. And while I was in that reading, I noticed that it's not just a matter of style, it's not just Enright's writing style. It's like different techniques and she uses in her narrative as the way she sets time and space in the narrative or the metaphors and irony used. So different aspects of the narrative, they all come together and I concluded it was her own aesthetics. And I say that it's a feminine aesthetics, but not the feminine aesthetics, because that's what we want to say. It's not one alternative or the opposition of what is we consider as a male narrative. It's a possibility of femininity, and it's a possibility of looking at motherhood, which is not regularly discussed and shared. And I consider it was an spiraling aesthetics because when we start reading Anne Enright's stories, we get into that fictional world, we get into those characters, we perceive women through different lenses. And when we return to our world, to our reality, we don't return to the same position we started. There is an elevation. And I consider this elevation is regarding self-awareness. We become more aware of who we are or where we come from and our position in society and in our family. So how these positions regarding gender are seen and how they are perceived. So I consider this as a spiral, and I used this image I tried to explain in different narratives by Anne Enright, short stories and novels and her own autobiography. So I consider that she uses this technique and she develops this feminine aesthetics in a spiral in her narratives, and the book is dedicated to that, is devoted to that, to detail these aesthetics. And I'm thankful for these women here. So I can see Professor Moynagh, Professor María Amor, Professor Laura, and Professor Munira, who are very important for me at this moment, because you are all part of a web of women who are part of this spiral, and one is holding the hand of each other and helping to go up. So I believe you are part of this spiral who really takes women up. So I'm very thankful for having you here.
That's great, Caroline. I know that we know through your words that you are really an enthusiastic researcher, teacher, and you will have all success. Now I will ask Professor Amor to say her words about your book, and then we will try to dialogue with them too. Please, Amor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Dear Caroline, colleagues and participants, it's a pleasure and an honor to participate in this wonderful event hosted by the Universidade de São Paulo. So, bom dia in Brazil, and good afternoon already in Ireland. I'm thrilled to be here today because as a current secretary of IDEI, the Spanish Association of Irish Studies, as Laura mentioned, I'm delighted to contribute to the excellent relations between ABEI and IDEI. This web is very solid. And as a scholar working on Irish studies and more particularly on Irish women writers, I heartily congratulate Caroline Eufrausino for the pertinence and relevance of her publication. As Moynagh already said, Anne Enright is not only one of the most gifted writers in the contemporary literary arena, she is also a key author among a generation of writers whose work has become essential to understand more fully a substantial part of Irish society, and I'm meaning women. A well-known writer, as Anne Enright is, she has explored the deep transformations of contemporary Irish society, and her work has resulted in innovative reworkings of generic conventions that she projects not only in the topics she tackles, and we can talk about motherhood, Catholicism, immigration, identity, I mean, it's quite broad, but also in text experimentality. And this is reflected in her challenging prose that demands the engagement of the reader, as Caroline's book demonstrates. In her book, Eufrausino analyzes Enright's strenuous and continuous efforts to give voice to the diversity of female experiences in Irish history, always connecting past and present, private and public, personal and political. And to prove this, Caroline has selected relevant writings that comprise a span of almost 30 years of time, from The Portable Virgin, published in 1991, to Actress, recently published. And this, in my opinion, is one of the strengths of the volume, because it offers a dynamic appraisal of Enright's evolution as a writer as well as a feminist. Accordingly, the issues explored by Enright always serve a higher purpose. And in my opinion, it is to unveil the contradictions between the personal experience and the public perception of it all. Enright also seeks to denounce both the subtle and obvious social forms of castration, limitation, marginalization that women have to endure because of their biological essence, which is just different from men's. And the affirmation that the female body is exposed as the ultimate side of patriarchal oppression is what allows Caroline to rest on Luce Garay's configuration of an alternative feminine discourse. At this point, I would like to bring to the fore one of the underlying ideas that dominate the analysis of Enright's narratives. And I refer to the term ambivalence, because in Enright's prose, Caroline detects both female glorification within the Irish nationalist tradition and in the celebration of femininity, but at the same time, the problematization of what is female, because the writer's introspective look at pregnancy, for instance, discloses the physical and ideological complexity of these biological female attributes, which is in Caroline's book very evident in her analysis of the short story Shaft. And these contradictions make me wonder if this ambivalence in Enright's narratives make sense at all. So I wonder, are her writings contradictory or rather explanatory? This might be a question that we can debate later. But going on, another remarkable aspect of Eufrausino's book is its focus on the three pillars, namely aesthetic, context, and style, which serve as basis for her main argument, which Moynagh already mentioned, which is what she calls Enright's spiraling aesthetic. Focusing on an autobiography, selected short stories, and novels, Caroline succeeds at highlighting some common patterns. The stories tend to be written in the first person. They are usually set in the present, but look back to familiar relationships which are rooted in the past. And as a result, Enright deploys a magnificent use of memory, which is a device that is used in different contexts all along her production. And in this sense, we can affirm that Enright's narratives seek to fill in the gaps, as Caroline expresses in her book. And naturally, this precarious exercise affects form, especially regarding time and place, and of course gives way to experimentation. Because memory tends to be tricky, and so progression and linearity are rare in Enright's narratives, as this volume confirms, of course. So it is at this point that Caroline's thesis on Enright's spiraling aesthetic takes form. And this concept, as proposed by her, explores the idea of coming from the inside to the outside, breaking the regular configuration of time and space, but beyond that, subverting expectations. And I think this is one of the greatest achievements of Enright. I'm not going much further, but I would like to conclude summarizing key remarks learned from the book that eventually raise a question. The objective of this book is to identify how these elements are renewed in Enright's texts and how the narrator motivates the reader to acquire a superior level of social awareness through feminine/feminist perspectives by means of this spiraling aesthetic, as Caroline has just explained. So my question to open the debate could be, for Caroline, in what sense would you say that reading Enright's production is transformative for the reader? I think this is a challenging question, and I'm eager to discuss it with you all. So thank you very much, and congratulations on this fantastic book, Caroline.
So thank you, Professor María Amor. I'd like to thank you for being here and also for the extensive writings that you've done on gender and Irish literature. So just to mention one of them, your article on Enright's The Grain Road, in which you talk about fragmentation and continuity. So your work has been also vital to the development of my own research. So thank you very much for your writings. And I would like to extend my gratitude to IDA, yes, the Spanish Association of Irish Studies. So just to mention like the path I've been through in order to get to this book finalized. In 2011, I presented my first paper on Enright in a conference, in an IDA conference in University of Oviedo in Spain. So it was my first paper on Enright, so the first presentation I've delivered. And I'm very grateful also to Professor Luz Mar, who encouraged me to present the very beginning of that research on Enright, and by the time on pregnancy. I was in a panel there during this conference with Professor Amor from UCD and Professor Hedwig Shaw from Sullivan University, who are great specialists on Enright, and they've been present also. They are in the book, yes. So I'm sure that these two great specialists, Anne Morrow and Hedwig Shaw, their words are there. Yes, their ideas are there in this book on Anne Enright, and we've been in touch during these years as well, and they've been really supportive. So I'm very thankful for that, and for IDA for this opportunity. And to all I extend my gratitude to different members of IDA. So my Professor María Amor, you are, please receive my thanks as the representative of IDA. Thank you very much. And I agree with you, like Anne Enright presents incoherences regarding the body and regarding the perception of the body in her narratives. And what I say is that we believe they are incoherences because we see coherence as another thing, like we see gender as a coherent institution, like a conception of something coherent. in our perspective, which is the convention in our contemporary society. But Enright problematizes that when she shows us that gender is not coherent. There are incoherences. We perceive our bodies differently. Sometimes what is seen as perfection, it's not. And we have our own perfection and imperfections. So as you said, I believe she tries to explain the body and the female body, the pregnant body in that short story in which I was trying to talk about it. I think she tries to explain the body and gender in a different way. That's why I believe it's elucidating and transformative in this sense. So we get to know a different perspective, a different point of view, which is not regularly and widespread in contemporary readings. We see this perspective, the women's perspective, differently. Today I'm a mother, but when I was writing this book, I wasn't. So I had the opportunity to put myself on these shoes and to see things different based on that. So I believe her writings for me were really transformative. And as once a professor said, that if a book transforms one person, yay, it's transformative. Yes, if it's able to transform at least one reader, it's achieved. But as I've seen, so Enright has been highly praised. So a critic has been recognizing her as a great writer of our times, not only in Ireland, but world literature, regarding this perspective she has on what is feminine and what might be feminine, what the multiple possibilities of being feminine. So I do believe her writings are transformative, and my proposal was that people read her as well and read her narratives and be transformed by it as I was. So thank you very much, Professor Maria Amor. Thank you, Moynagh. Thank you, Laura. Laura, I'm really thankful for everything, like for all the support since day one. So when I decided to go to Ireland, you said, go to Ireland, Moynagh will take care of you. So Moynagh, thank you very much for being here all this time. And Professor Maria Amor, and in the name of IADE, thank you very much for this great association who is in contact with us, helping and enriching us so much. So, and Professor Munira, thank you for starting all of this. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Caroline. I think that this has been a very also emotional session, because of course we are very proud of you, of your achievements, and all the support that you have received from all our colleagues and all your friends also from ABEI Association that have encouraged you. But you have this great inner, Mariana is here also to attest to that. And I know that all this inner strength that you have, you are sharing with all your colleagues and your students. And this is the aim of the human chain, the pedagogical chain, the educators' chain in our lives, because we are really dedicated and motivated for what we are always doing, teaching, sharing, and understanding better and enlarging our knowledge. So we are very proud of all of you here, because as I said at the very beginning, this is the result of all this network with IADE, that Munira was the first one with the president at that time, that you have that idea of exchange. And then we continue, of course, from the very beginning with IASIL, that is the way that all our scholars meet and share their research and are so supportive. And I think that you haven't forgotten anybody to mention, because you also mentioned Hedwig and all our other colleagues that have been sharing their knowledge on Enright. And if she were still with us, she is with us today, I think, because of all this tribute that you have done publishing this book. Thanks a lot. And thank you very much. A hug. We could have been face to face sharing cold drinks and things to eat, but then we do that in this way. And I invite all of you to come to the afternoon session where our colleagues from Galway, the NUIM project, that is a very important project that they are carrying on, and we hope we could join them in the near future when the pandemic is over. But take care, all of you, and thanks again from all my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.